In less than 2 weeks now, Joe and I will be getting married. I'll take the cheers, I'll take the applause, thank you. I've tried to avoid preaching about wedding planning here, but we're less than 2 weeks out now, and we're at the point where all of my free time is spent thinking about this detail or that logistic or whatever, so this is what you get today. So maybe a month or two ago, Joe asked me how we wanted to handle our gifts to each other. And I confess that was the first time that I had considered that when you get married to someone, you're supposed to give them a gift. Besides the rings that we would be exchanging and all that. And so that's how I ended up this past Wednesday planting a blueberry bush out there by the pollinator garden. Let me explain. So, Joe loves plants, so that part was easy. But there's something that you should probably know about me, and that is that growing up, I really did not like anything that had to do with taking care of yards or gardening. I hated raking leaves, I hated weeding, I hated mulching, I hated getting my hands dirty. As a kid, I would tell my mom that when I grew up, I was going to live in an apartment so that I would never have to do yard work again. And she'd tell me, go rake those leaves anyway. But over the past couple of years, something strange happened. See, little by little, my YouTube algorithm started to get the impression that what I really wanted in life was to become a gardener. I don't know if it's just a function of entering your 30s and the algorithm suddenly thinks, well, he's a real adult now, and real adults like real adult things, like gardening, or if it was something else entirely, but suddenly my YouTube Discover page began to fill up with all sorts of videos from channels dedicated to teaching you how to become a better gardener. Shout out to Kevin and the team at Epic Gardening. If you're looking for gardening content, go check them out. So there I am, I'm watching people graft fruit trees, I'm learning about composting and fertilizer schedules, I'm researching tips and tricks for growing things in Zone 6A, and I'm using phrases like overwinter unironically. And maybe, just maybe, I thought, this is what maturing looks like. So this content rabbit hole led me to the conclusion that a blueberry bush would be the perfect wedding gift for Joe as we begin this new chapter in our lives together. As it happens, blueberries do pretty well in containers. They prefer more acidic soil, which is easier to monitor and to control than in a container than in the ground. And so we'd be able to take this bush with us as we move throughout our lives together. It's kind of important when you're a pastor, subject to the appointment system and living in parsonages. Well, we're having a fall wedding, and it turns out as well that if you plant blueberries in the fall, they get the chill hours that they need over the winter so they can bear a bumper harvest the following summer. That is, if the birds don't get to them first. And if you take care of them right, blueberries will last a long time, 20, 30, even 50 years. So that's how I found myself out by the pollinator garden on Wednesday, armed with all my research and a desire to get it planted before the rain started. I had my 25-gallon grow bag. I had my soil and my fertilizer and my soil acidifier, and I was ready to go. And suddenly, I remembered why I hated gardening as a kid. I was sweating something fierce. Muscles that I didn't know that I had were screaming. My lower back and I still aren't on speaking terms. Maybe, just maybe, gardening isn't for me after all. Which brings us to our passage this morning. Because this letter in Jeremiah is written to a people who are discovering that planting in exile is hard work. You see, the Babylonians have taken these elites from Jerusalem, the priests and the scribes and the leaders, and forced them to live in a foreign land. They've been ripped out of their homes and forced to watch everything familiar collapse. But when Jeremiah writes to them, they're still staring back towards Jerusalem. They're yearning for something that's not coming back. They're listening to the false prophets who tell them that everything will go back just the way that it was. All we have to do is sit back and trust in God, and we'll be back home before we know it. But that's not how exile works. Even if you do eventually get to go back home, exile changes you, and home just isn't the same. So Jeremiah's word from God is clear. This is where you are now. You are in Babylon. You're not going back to Jerusalem. The very first thing that God tells the exiles through the prophet isn't just hold on and I will fix this soon. It's build houses and live in them. It's plant gardens and eat what they produce. It's marry, have children, multiply, live your lives. And it's not the word that the exiles expected. And it's certainly not the word that the exiles wanted to hear. See, they wanted a timeline for their return. But instead, God gave them a command to live. These words land right in the middle of their longing for what used to be. And if we're honest, it lands right in the middle of ours too. Because we all long for those good old days. Back when the world felt simpler. And Lord knows that the church isn't immune from this. It's a bit of a cliche among church folk to talk about how we yearn for those glory days. You know, back when the pews were full and the church was at the center of the community and the Sunday school had 500 kids and King David himself was our pastor. And I don't mean to denigrate the past. These stories matter, and they shape core aspects of our identity as a congregation. Our history can and should inform our present. But Jeremiah warns us that if all we do is look backwards, we will miss what God is doing right here and right now. Jerusalem is not coming back, but God has not abandoned us. God is in Babylon too. God is here. And it's here, in the middle of the world as it is, that the weight starts to set in. Because as I stood out there in the front yard on Wednesday, sweating and muttering and remembering just how much I do not like gardening, something else began to creep in. The world is heavy right now. We turn on the news and scroll through our news feeds and see pain in the faces of our neighbor. We see families in Gaza suspended in this moment between cautious relief and grief as they try to piece their lives back together after a genocide. We see masked federal agents arresting and detaining men, women, and children here at home without any regard to their citizenship status. And friends, if it feels like it's far away, it's not. We see it here in our own community too, if we know where to look. People who are sleeping in their cars and in tents, on the street, while we hear our elected leaders use language that criminalizes poverty. Not just up in Saratoga Springs, but right here in the town of Ballston. There's a public hearing on Tuesday evening, this coming Tuesday evening, on a proposed camping ban that will only make the lives of some of our most vulnerable neighbors more difficult. It's in the midst of all of this that I found myself asking, what business do I have planting blueberry bushes? What business do Joe and I have planning a wedding? What business do we have putting so much time and energy and love into something beautiful when the world is so broken? It's a heavy question, but I suspect that I'm not alone in asking it. And it's certainly the kind of question that the exiled Jerusalemites were asking in Babylon. Later on in that same chapter, we find a fun response to Jeremiah's letter that basically amounts to, hey, can you believe that this guy Jeremiah is telling us to build houses and plant gardens? But Jeremiah persists. He tells his people to remember that God has always been closest to them when they were in the wilderness. He tells them to not give in to despair because despair won't put the world back together. He tells them not to be passive observers, but active participants in the work that God is doing in their own midst. He says, seek the welfare of the city where I have sent you into exile, and pray to the Lord on its behalf, for in its welfare you will find your welfare. It's not a passive waiting, but a call to act, a call to invest and to build and to plant, to care and to hope together. And I think that is where my fatal gardening mistake lies. Because you see, when I was out there on Wednesday afternoon, I was trying to do it alone. I thought that I could muscle my way through planting that blueberry bush by myself. I thought that I didn't need help. And now I'm paying for it in sore muscles and a lot of muttered words that I probably shouldn't say up here from this pulpit. But planting a garden is a lot like living a life of faith. It's not meant to be a solo project. The work that Jeremiah calls the exiles to is communal work. God does not tell the exiles, go and build your own little bunkers and try to survive on your own. No. God says build homes together. Plant gardens together. Seek the welfare of this city together. It's a call that ripples throughout time and space to this very day, if only we have ears to hear it. Because I know that it can feel overwhelming to live in this moment. I know that it can feel foolish to plant seeds when the world seems to be on fire. I know that it can feel like building and celebrating are luxuries when so many others are suffering. But that's an attitude that leads to despair. Despair that we have to resist with every fiber of our being, because despair will not heal the world. Despair will not stop the injustice that we see. Despair will not change our community. But planting a garden will. Showing up will. Bearing witness will. That is our calling, church. We can either be the people with our eyes stuck on the past, with our lives oriented toward Jerusalem. Or we can look around and see how God is moving here and now, even in Babylon. We can be the people who seek the welfare of our most vulnerable in our own communities, bearing witness to their humanity when others would try to dehumanize them. We can be the people who plant and tend to our own gardens here and now. Because that little blueberry bush stands for something far more than what I hope will be years of tasty berries. It's a sign that Joe and I are choosing to build a life together at this moment, meeting the world as it is rather than as we wish that it were. It's a reminder that even in unsettled times, something can grow. And it's a reminder that gardens do not grow themselves. They require sweat and they require community. They require faith that something will take root even when we can't see it yet. Someone can plant and someone else can water, but it's God who provides the growth. So right now, it's still sitting out there in the pollinator garden. It'll eventually make its way to the Round Lake Parsonage, but for now, it's here, right out front. A visible sign that something has been planted here, calling us as a church to imagine what new life might look like here in our own community. Because God is here, friends, and God has work for us to do yet. This time that we're in is the time that we have, and time that God is here with us in this time and in this place, calling our attention to the gardens that we can plant and tend in the here and in the now. So may the one who began a good work be faithful to complete it in us. The work continues, friends. Amen.